Okay, thank you very much. My name's Nick Booth. I'm from Birmingham. I run a company called Podnosh, which I set up back in 2005. Oddly enough, my background overlaps with some of the things we've already talked about this morning. So I was a BBC journalist for a long time, for the best part of 15 years, political reporter, documentary maker, parliamentary reporter, specialised also in local government. I left the BBC to run a Quango, a quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organisation, which after 6 months I decided was utterly soul-destroying, so I stopped doing that. And then I sort of became self-employed and started, almost by accident, doing things with the internet that related to some of my previous interests, which is how Podnosh emerged. Now, what I want to do is talk to you about some of the things that I've been involved with in some shape or form in Birmingham, things that I've got direct experience of that I hope are relevant to you. The first time I did anything that we would now recognise as social media was back in 2005. I was approached to interview active citizens in Birmingham, and somebody said, can you go out and interview, for audio interviews, 6 active citizens in Birmingham, capture their stories, turn it into a CD, we'll stick the CD on the front of a magazine, and we'll post it out to people. And I thought, yeah, I'm interested in that. So I went ahead and interviewed these active citizens who were fascinating. All I was interested in is what made them tick, why they did what they did, and to give them space to tell their own stories rather than coming at it from a journalistic point of view, which is, what's my line, where's my headline? So I was trying to give them room to express themselves. And about the same time, this thing called podcasting was appearing. And so, because I was interested in the internet, I said to the commissioner, do you mind if I put these on a podcast as well? And they went, all right, sounds okay. And I put these first 6 programmes on something called the Grassroots channel and popped that on the internet and put it on iTunes. And it was so early that we ended up very quickly as one of the top 10 podcasts in the UK. And even today, you can see these are non-profit podcasts. The Grassroots channel is 18th in top non-profit podcasts in the UK. So this is a chap in his back bedroom with a cheap recorder interviewing active citizens in Birmingham and putting them on the internet. And at the time, what I thought was clever about this was I was doing radio without the expense of a radio station. That's genuinely what I thought was innovative about it. But as it went on, I interviewed more and more of these people. In the end, I did about 60 programmes, 60 interviews. And as I would go around meeting people, they'd tell me their story, and I'd say, well, have you met Margaret, who I might have interviewed 2 months before? Because she lives 5 miles away from you, and she's trying to do something very, very similar. And they go, no, I haven't. And so I'd phone Margaret, and they'd go and meet each other, and they'd start to do things differently. And being part of the Grassroots channel and listening to each other's stories was connecting them and connecting me to them. And it took me a while, it really did take me a while for the penny to drop. But what I realised was happening, which looks obvious now, is I was building a network and I was building relationships. And the media wasn't the point. The media was the mechanism to build the relationships. And it really genuinely, think about me as a broadcaster whose job it was to fill a space that was exactly 29 minutes and 40 seconds long and to satisfy an audience. And it took me a while to switch my head from content as the point to content simply being a means to build relationships. And the question is, what do you do with those relationships? So that's sort of network number 1 that I got involved in almost accidentally creating. And around about 2007, I think Facebook had just brought out Facebook groups. And I was tinkering with them, and I just thought, there were a number of us. I'd started blogging by this point because it was the most efficient way of getting the podcast on the net. I set up this thing called the Birmingham Bloggers Group. And it was just a group on Facebook, and that was it. And there were no rules. It was, if you were interested in being part of the Birmingham Bloggers Group, then join. That simple. And so people started joining. We got about 35, 40 people who joined it. And it had been going for a few months, and it was just sitting there, and I wasn't doing anything with it. So I thought, I'd better do something. So I sent them all a message in, I think, December 2007. And basically said, on this evening in January, I'm going to be in this pub if you want to come and say hello. And phoned a mate and said, please make sure you're there so I'm not alone. And that evening I turned up at this pub, and about 35, 40 people turned up. And to my real surprise, I thought they'd be very techie and they'd want to talk about WordPress and different weird things and stuff that I didn't really understand. But they weren't. They talked about Birmingham, and they were very passionate about Birmingham, and they cared about the city and the way it was run, and they were very, very civically minded. And they got very drunk and very argumentative, and they had a really lovely time. And they said, can we do that again? And because it's so easy to organise these things, that wasn't difficult. So I just kept on organising monthly meetings. Every time somebody wanted to make that monthly meeting complicated and difficult, I would just make them an admin on the group and say, if you want to do that, you do it yourself. But that's what we did. We just kept on meeting for no purpose whatsoever. And I didn't really know that we were doing this at the time, but when I look back, this is how I describe what was happening. We were building what I call a stock pot of social capital. We were just casually into this simmering water, throwing a bit of this and a scrap of that, and creating this stock pot of trust, this stock pot of social capital, which sort of each of us individually had one, but also collectively we were creating one as well. And the thing about a stock pot is you're not anticipating what you're going to make out of it. It's not a process that says, we want to achieve this at the end, therefore we will start here. It's just about connecting and building trust and seeing what will happen, and not even seeing what will happen next, not even necessarily knowing that you're doing it for that reason. So, with a stock pot, you can make soup, you can make a risotto, what can you make? So I just want to talk to you about some of the things that people made with this stock pot of social capital. Okay, so let me start with this one. This is a website that was made entirely by volunteers in a fairly short space of time. But if I give you the context, the big city plan was Birmingham City Council's plan for the 25-year future of 800 hectares of the city centre. Now, Birmingham City Council is the largest local authority in Birmingham, so this is a big piece of civic engagement. And it's important. It's not just to do with how well commerce will work, but there are neighbourhoods there. It's to do with gentrification. It's to do with people's homes. A lot is at stake. So Birmingham City Council do a fairly conventional consultation process. They release the big city plan. They arrange public meetings. They arrange bus trips to provide information into neighbourhoods, and they engage the media. And at the same time, they decide to get really funky and do something on the internet. So they create a page on the internet where there is a PDF that you can download. You read the PDF, it's the whole plan, you read the whole plan, there's a black box, and you type your comment into the black box and you press send, and it just sort of disappears. And that was their online digital engagement. And a friend of mine called John Bounds, who runs a website called Birmingham It's Not Shit, decided that this wasn't good enough. And so what he did was he got a group of us together and we talked about what was possible, and we decided that we would try and improve the process, simply on a voluntary basis. So he set up a WordPress blog, and we each took away a copy of this PDF that was written in that dreadful regeneration speak, that language that it seems that only urban regeneration specialists are able to talk in, that is really difficult to understand. And we took each individual paragraph and we translated it from Regen Speak, which you can see on the right, into our best efforts at plain English, which you can see on the left. And we gave every single paragraph its own blog post, and we published it as a separate website. And this took about a fortnight of people sitting in front of the telly in their spare time, about 7 or 8 people doing this on a voluntary basis. There would be occasions where somebody would come across a sentence that they really did not understand, and they'd put it on Twitter, and Twitter would look at it and scratch their heads and go, nope, that doesn't mean a thing. In fact, there were quite a lot of sentences like that. And so this website was launched, and people started commenting on it. And effectively what had happened is we turned the process, the consultation process, from individual citizen or organisation representing citizens and government into a conversation, from a two-way transaction into a many-faceted transaction. So you can see here one single paragraph on option D about a place called Digbeth, which is the sort of digital heart of Birmingham, 15 comments. And these are, and then obviously in the first comment, I mean, this looks fairly obvious now, but back in 2009, this wasn't. This was actually quite surprising. So the first comment would be, I don't think this is a good idea because of this. And instead of you getting 40 comments saying, I don't think this is a good idea, other people could then build on it and say, yes, but we could do it this way, or you could do that. And it would allow citizens to collaborate in improving policy. And it occurred to me, I mean, round about a quarter of all comments that were made on the big city plan altogether were made through this website. The City Council's planning department was quite, I think, peeved, might be the right word, but quite cross. and struggled to decide. They refused to accept these as legitimate comments as part of the consultation to begin with. And we had a phone call from somebody going, "Who gave you permission to do this?" "We don't need permission." "You must need permission to do this." "No, we don't." And they really couldn't get their head around the fact that we just had the freedom and the power and the will to do this. And it occurred to me, once the dust had settled, one thing that occurred to me was, had I still been a journalist, and there'd been a consultation process that was a bit skewed and not very satisfactory, I might have written a column saying this is a bit rubbish, or I might have got somebody on the radio and said, "Why isn't this good enough?" But it would never have occurred to me to use all the resources of the BBC to just make it better, which of course is a much more constructive thing to do and a much more democratic thing to do, and in some ways a much more analytic and incisive thing to do. But John and his frustration with something that was a bit daft and a few volunteers had gone on and made it better. So what else? Help Me Investigate was a website which no longer exists, I'm afraid, but it was a website that Paul Bradshaw and myself and a chap called Steph Lewandowski, who I'll mention later on, set up. And it was a response to the mainstream media in the UK running short of money, their business model broken, going to government and saying, "We protect democracy, please give us money." And mainstream media was saying, "We investigate things, we're here to save democracy." And so Paul and I wondered whether investigations could happen without the mainstream media, whether citizens were capable of doing that job for themselves. So we set up Help Me Investigate. The idea was that people could ask civic questions and pull together a team of people from all over the country or the world to collaborate to try and uncover the answers. So one question that popped up there was to do with Birmingham City Council. Poor dear Birmingham City Council, don't feel sorry for them. Which was, when can we expect a new birmingham.gov.uk website? And this was a product of a rumour that a new website for the City Council was late and over budget. So, as is the way, this question goes up and about 30 people, it's always about 30, but about 30 people signed up to help collaborate to find an answer to this question. And they worked their way around the internet and searched for as much information as they could and popped it into Help Me Investigate. Somebody inside the council set up an anonymous Twitter account and started leaking information saying, "Look for the minutes of this and ask this question of this person." So we acquired a Twitter deep throat. And eventually enough information over a few weeks was scraped together and a Freedom of Information request went in. And the council replied to the Freedom of Information request by saying to us, "Right, yes, okay, the website should have taken us 18 months and cost £600,000, but at this point it's so far taken us 4 years and cost us £2.8 million.